In this video, I will share my performance metrics from practicing 51 data insights questions on days 42 to 44 of my GMAT Prep. If you have been following my GMAT Prep, you will notice that this video is unusual in that I am summarizing my learnings from several days in a single video. There's a reason for that. I had to significantly slow down my GMAT Prep through these days for personal reasons which I have described in previous videos. In short, all the practice I did on these days was done sitting in a hospital room while I was taking care of a family member. As a result, the amount of focused attention I could devote to the GMAT was limited, and that shows in the fact that I was only able to practice 51 questions over 3 days. That said, one thing I do want to call out is that I made sure to practice at least a few questions every day to ensure that I was maintaining touch with the GMAT. Generally, my advice to anybody preparing for the GMAT is that if you run into trouble with events that are outside of your control and hence are unable to devote sufficient time for your GMAT prep, you must at least make sure to maintain touch with the GMAT by practicing between 5 to 10 questions every day. In such circumstances, don't optimize for accuracy or velocity. Your intention should simply be to keep your GMAT muscle memory alive. That said, let's talk about how I did on the 51 data insights questions. The 51 questions consisted of 48 two-part analysis questions and 3 multi-source reasoning questions. I answered 36 of the 48 two-part analysis questions correctly and all 3 of the multi-source reasoning questions correctly. Overall, I answered 12 two-part analysis questions incorrectly. For reasons I described earlier in this video, I was not tracking time on the questions I was practicing during these 3 days, so I will not touch upon velocity. Of the 12 questions I answered incorrectly, 1 was easy, 2 were medium, and 9 were of hard difficulty. The good thing is that my mistakes were primarily on hard questions. There is one important conceptual learning that I want to talk about. This was on a 2-part analysis question modeled as a fill-in-the-blank question. I was required to complete 2 sentences which were part of a larger passage. In hindsight, reframing those sentences into questions would have made it easier for me to identify the answer. To give you an example, let's say you have 2 sentences in a longer passage which you need to complete. The first sentence is that Alex went to a business school in blank. This was in line with his aspirations because he had lived in blank cities before. From a mental processing perspective, it will be significantly easier for you to find answers to these questions if you translated these 2 sentences into appropriate questions. The first sentence can be expressed as a question. Which city did Alex go to business school in? The second sentence can be expressed as a question as well. How many cities did Alex live in before going to business school? Moving on to the other questions which I answered incorrectly, I noticed that most of my errors were the result of being overwhelmed by complex verbiage or other information given on the question. The only way to correct such mistakes is to ensure that you are paying attention to each and every word on the question as well as in the answer options. Given the test's time constraints, that is not always doable, and errors like this will inevitably creep into your GMAT performance. Your strategy should be to practice enough so that you are able to minimize such errors while solving questions at high speed. So that is all for today. Starting day 45, I will transition towards taking several official GMAT practice exams in a row in the lead up to my final GMAT test. I will see you in the next video.